Hey, good people, how y'all doing? Welcome to another edition of New Socialist Era, bringing it to you once again, freedom and liberty style. Make sure you hit all the buttons, you know the drill probably. Make sure you leave a comment down below. Love to hear from y'all, especially. Lately, there's been this talk about capitalism and coercion more frequently over the past few months or so. We've seen a few debates talking about it that have popped up, and do I think that capitalism does take advantage or depends on at least some level of implicit coercion to make it do its thing? Absolutely. Now, some on the economic right, the capitalist cheerleaders, might get a little miffed at that notion. Like, how dare you make our great system, in quotations, of course, how do you make it look so, trying to make it look so bad, so terrible? I'm like, we're just describing it as it is. If anything, capitalism makes itself look bad, or rather I should say, capitalists, they're the ones who are fucking it up. Ideally, they say capitalism could be this, but in reality, it's very much something different. Okay, the point of any capitalist enterprise is to maximize profit. That's it. That's the main that is the main driving force behind any capitalist enterprise. Not just capitalist enterprises do other things too on the side and in a proxy sort of way, absolutely, but the main focus, the main driver of any capitalist enterprise is to maximize profit any way it can. I'm not saying it's going to do anything horrendous or evil or Dr. Evil level type of unethical sort of actions or whatever. I'm not saying that, but some do that. They pollute and get away with it and don't give a shit. And it's like, but a lot of them will find ways to maximize profit as much as possible. And one of the key ways to do that is to reduce your costs. Because if you reduce your costs, you get to keep more profit, and that's the name of the game under capitalism. And so one way to do that is to make sure that your workers are getting paid the least as possible. I'm not saying they're getting paid $1 a day, but you make sure that you try to keep those costs down as much as possible, and you'll use whatever leverage you have to make that happen. And how capitalists tend to take advantage of that is they realize there's a lot of people out there looking for work. Even if it's only a few percent of the population, that's still quite a few people looking for work actively, and quite a few of them don't really have the kind of skill set to demand that higher wage. So the capitalist business owners, they understand that, so they'll basically use the desperation of what's called the reserve pool of labor to put down pressure on wages, and they're more than happy to do it. I'm not saying it's like a totally necessarily super evil thing that they're doing, but they're happy enough, or at least most of them are happy enough to do that in order to maximize profit, because in the end of the game, they don't really give a shit about you. They only give a shit about extracting as much labor out of you as much as possible and paying you the absolute least. A good concept to look up if you haven't already done so is to look up the idea of what's that called? I just had it a second ago. The diametrically opposed interest in the workplace between the employer and employee. Simply put, the employer is trying to get the most amount of productivity out of their employees and pay them the less, while the employees are trying to get paid the most and maybe not produce as much as they absolutely can. So you always got that sort of struggle inside the capitalist enterprise, which could be that sort of energy being used to do that could be used towards being more productive and more stable as a business if that business was democratized, at least in part, like they do with worker representation on boards of directors, like in larger companies. If they at least had that, then those businesses would be a bit more stable in economic downturns, a bit more productive overall, and still be roughly the same profitability would roughly be the same. So, and of course Germany, they've been doing this for 45 years with their Codetermination. Well, the Codetermination is just that businesses are still privately owned, but the workers have representatives put on the board of directors to make sure that the workers have a voice through representation on the board of directors. And guess what? It seems to work out pretty well for them compared to traditionally private only ran enterprises. So that would definitely be a semi-socialist sort of solution, something that people can easily understand and get behind. Worker-owned cooperatives, of course, or the fully owned businesses. Let's say businesses that are fully owned by the workers themselves, and naturally, if the workers, either through direct or indirect having their voices heard in the business, it automatically makes it, not really exploitative no more. Doesn't really make it coercive no more, and at least not to the degree that we have in the United States under the vast majority of our businesses. So yeah, just I know I'm probably going to get some comments down below like about coercion. What does coercion even mean? And shit like that. There are different levels of coercion. Absolutely, there's like implicit to explicit. Versus you have quote unquote having to go out and work in order to make a monetary gain to be able to participate in our economy that is largely functioning off the back of our monetary system. If you want to do it, you're indirectly press ganged into doing that. Versus a mugger hiding in a dumpster, you walk past an alley, the guy jumps out and says, "Give me money or else." I mean, that's explicit coercion, So there are definitely different levels of that. And it all depends on the person's personal situation. That let's say if someone's well off enough, but they just like to work, they like to be productive, it keeps them busy, keeps them young, keeps them active. They go out and they do it because they really want to. Fine, that's not really coercive. But if someone is like, man, I got to work for this guy and I don't really have the skill set to get a better wage, and my health insurance is tied to the job, and I pretty much got to do this because my kid needs the health care, and this is I think a relatively uniquely United States sort of thing. I'm sure other countries do it too, but by and large, as far as at least in the developed world, this is the way it is. So with all those factors in there, you pretty much have to do it or you're totally fucked. Especially if your kid really does need that health care. If they got some, God forbid, some sort of chronic illness that has to be taken care of constantly. So there's definitely those things that play into factor as well. So yeah, it all depends on the person's personal situation and what other mitigating factors would basically make it a truly voluntary decision to go out and work for a capitalist, versus someone who's basically super desperado. They don't really have effectively many other options other than to scratch a living off rocks, and you're just going to teach them how to do that for free, and maybe on YouTube if they have the internet connection. Who knows? But yeah, for me, coercion, at least the desperation does play into, or the relatively collective desperation plays into the factor that capitalists will be more than happy by and large to take advantage of that desperation in order to basically maximize profits, because that is the name of the game of any capitalist enterprise. And you get some people on the capitalist right, they're going to freak out whenever I don't know if they freak out, but they'll get a little miffed at it and say, no, capitalism is about puppies and rainbows and all this other happy horse shit. And if it's not that, then it's not true capitalism. It's actually something else, communism or whatever. You get those absolutists out there. Those guys are just using the economic version of the one drop rule. One drop of not capitalism makes it all not capitalism, which is really goofy to me. I'm beyond reductionist. But for me, yes, capitalism by and large, at least in the United States, the way it does now, does depend pretty heavily on people being relatively desperate to work for shit wages. And the capitalist class, most of them will be more than happy to take advantage of that to maximize their profits, because that's the name of the game. If you don't maximize profits as a capitalist, you are reducing your likelihood of staying in business if everybody else has the option of paying shit wages versus there being a minimum wage set to where people can't fall below that wage, threshold, then everybody else in the capitalist business world has to play by them rules. But if you are the lone wolf and you're paying your people a bit more, there's that technically a bit more of an increased risk of you losing out to competition. And there's a reason why a capitalist, they don't want to work for other capitalists. I mean, think about it. They really don't want to, because they understand why. They understand the game versus people by and large in the United States. Or the workers by and large in the United States. Yeah, the people, the workers, they've been fed this narrative over the many decades that, hey, it's just part of the game. It's just part of the system. It's just the way it is. Just accept it. That's just sort of coping mechanism that have been drilled into our skulls for decades. But anyway, let me know what you think down below, and I really appreciate your comments and subscribing and all that wonderful stuff, and I'll see you around next time.